Welcome to Asia Undercurrent's 29th session on collaborating to strengthen the Indo-Pacific through innovation. If you're watching on the Nikkei channel or YouTube Live and have not already submitted a question that you want to ask, please scroll down to find a link to submit live during the webinar. My name is Marie Anchordoguy. I am Professor Emerita at the University of Washington in Seattle. My research interests are in how Japan's capitalist system has changed, as Japan has moved from a catch-up nation status to becoming a mature global superpower, helping defend the international world order. Much of my work has been on high-tech industries such as semiconductors, and also on Japan's evolving ecosystem for high-tech startups. Today, we will focus on collaboration among Japan and other Indo-Pacific countries to strengthen their ties and resilience through innovation. International cooperation on innovation is becoming much more important in the new, unstable, and still evolving multipolar world order. The Indo-Pacific is a diverse region, creating both challenges and opportunities. Can we exploit the opportunities? Can Asia-Pacific countries collaborate more to strengthen semiconductor supply chains? Can they promote friendly and resilient supply chains in other areas of innovation, such as coping with climate change or accessing a more stable supply of rare earths? Would greater collaboration on innovation related to robots, electric vehicles, AI, drug discovery, and disaster prevention, to just mention a few areas, would cooperation in these areas help strengthen the democracies in the Indo-Pacific region? Let me briefly introduce the three distinguished panelists who will help us better understand how the Indo-Pacific region can be strengthened through innovation. First, we have Dr. Madiha Fuad. Dr. Fuad is an international speaker and social entrepreneur passionate about using technology to improve the mental health industry. She is the founder and CEO of Plus Vibes Group, a health tech platform that has supported over 70,000 users, blending digital tools, community support, and AI-powered features for corporations, governments, and universities. She runs workshops about these issues across the Asia-Pacific. She has received many awards, including the Global 50 Rising Stars in ESG, the National Social Entrepreneur Award, ASEAN Women Entrepreneur Award, and Malaysia's Top 30 Women of Excellence Award. She's been on the global stage at events such as the Korea APEC Forum and the China ASEAN Women Entrepreneurs Dialogue. Our second panelist is Mr. Takashi Imamura. Mr. Imamura is a business economist and political analyst specializing in the US economy and politics, as well as international relations. He is president and CEO of the Marubeni Institute, one of Japan's top think tanks. He has spent his whole career at Marubeni. He served as senior vice president of Marubeni America Corporation and general manager of the Washington office from 2008 to 2017. Soon after returning to Japan, he became an executive officer at Marubeni. He has also served as a member of the APEC Business Advisory Council and has been chair of the planning department at the Keidanren Committee on Foreign Affairs. Last but not least, we have Dr. Manish Sharma. Dr. Sharma is a professor of economics at Hosei University and a visiting research fellow at the Institute of Geoeconomics. He's held research and teaching positions at renowned institutions, including the Jawaharlal Nehru University, University of Tokyo, London School of Economics, Temple University, and Doshisha Business School. Until 2012, Dr. Sharma was director, mainly in charge of India-related issues, in the corporate finance department at Daiwa Capital Markets, Tokyo headquarters, where he provided strategic financial guidance to major corporations. Then he became a full-time academic, bringing this extensive practical knowledge to students across Asia. Other activities of his include 13 years of radio newscasting with NHK World and running an investment advisory firm. Now we will turn to these three distinguished panelists to hear their thoughts about how there can be more collaboration among Asia's democracies to strengthen the region through innovation. Each panelist will speak for 6 minutes, and then we will move to discussion and later to audience Q&A. So first we have Dr. Fuad, please.
Thank you so much, Professor. A very good morning, thought leaders across the world, if I may say. I'm truly honored to be on Asia Undercurrent alongside such esteemed speakers as we have heard. Thank you so much for having me. Well, my take on the topic. How do we really collaborate to strengthen Indo-Pacific through innovation? Perhaps I can start by sharing my opinion on what I believe to be the gap and the context of the era that we currently live in. Professor highlighted a key point in our opening speech, and the concept here was really about self-sustaining innovation. But the question you rightfully pointed out was, can we really innovate alone? So to put this into context, let's take a look at last week's phrase that echoed among global leaders at the Munich Security Conference, and that was strategic autonomy. In Europe's case, it's to no longer depend on the United States for security, intelligence, infrastructure, but we can debate that Europe may not have such extensive geospatial technology. So what's the plan? Is strategic autonomy, it might shift and be focused on diversified trading partners and partnerships, which reduces vulnerability while staying globally connected. Similarly, I'm of that same opinion. For our region, Indo-Pacific needs to collaborate, needs to open its doors to extensive collaboration with multiple trade partners. And in this part, it might even be using and leveraging on the triple helix model, which is the government, industry, academia, which is what we have today. Because I really do believe that through diversity in thoughts and culture, that is where innovation truly lies. So I'll raise 3 points here. The first is that innovation has to be strategic. So to identify what are the current gaps within our countries and what are the strengths and weaknesses. We are operating in a complete shift and new economy, new era. And we are, Indo-Pacific specifically, is facing overlapping pressure. When we look at geopolitical, we look at supply chain realignment. Malaysia was the chairmanship last year, and we see a lot of shift in our strategy, in our plans for ASEAN as well. There's rapid AI adoption, climate risk, but at the same time, the region is also experiencing huge, unprecedented opportunity, and that is driven by digital acceleration. And then we have the demographic shifts. Perhaps in Japan, it might be the aging population. In Asia, it's very much still young, but then it's how do we tap these kind of talents and not have that brain drain? And then it's also about cross-border collaboration. So innovation has to be strategic. But that moves me to my second point, which is Indo-Pacific's diversity as a strategic advantage. And when we look at culture, we look at consumer markets, we look at income levels, we look at demographic profiles and technological maturity. Some economies are advanced in manufacturing hubs, like Japan. Others, like us, we are digitally agile, where we see adoption for digital technologies and social entrepreneurship using technology is quite something that is widely talked about and widely advocated within ASEAN. And there are different stages to these developments. So ignoring this diversity would be such a waste. But I'm not saying that collaborating will be easy. There are gaps, right? Especially with all the diverse cultures and the miscommunication, perhaps, and the alignment that we all must have. Which brings me to my last point, which is the core message of today, and that is collaboration as the acceleration engine. And it's not that we can outscale economies alone, but it's more of collectively, I believe that Indo-Pacific holds this enormous capability where we all have our strengths. But when I speak to my ASEAN counterparts, they're saying, okay, collaboration requires network. How do we get this network? How do we be part of this opportunity? It really does go back into this triple helix model, this whole government, academia, the industry partnerships, and providing the opportunity for us to collaborate. So the question is, and I hope that is something that we will discuss, Professor, is how do we really leverage on these different ideas and really embark on these opportunities? So looking forward to an engaging discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we turn to Imamura-san.
Yes, thanks for providing me these great opportunities. Yes, I'd like to speak about focusing on Japan. So I think the first question, the importance of innovation for Japan's Indo-Pacific. I would like to emphasize that advanced technology has become a key battleground in international competition. And so this is a great challenge for the not the big powers, some between the big and the middle power for Japan, as the Japan's. The major powers hold an advantage in technological development due to their great access to talent, funding, information, and accumulated technological expertise. And moreover, major powers that secure such technology can further strengthen their position against middle powers through containment and weaponizing technology. So middle power face disadvantages acting alone. So nations should enhance their autonomy by acquiring unique technologies while forming a voluntary coalition of middle powers to share and combine these respective technologies, thereby increasing the group's autonomy and indispensability. And then Japan fortunately have some strong, the great strategy as Prime Minister Takaichi lead and decided. So yesterday, after the landslide victory in the last week's election, she holds the press conference and also emphasizes her growth strategy of Japan's. As all of you know, that this the strategy for 17 areas, 17 strategic sectors. Regarding Japan and also the opportunity for the Indo-Pacific areas, regions, countries, I would like to emphasize that among the 17 strategic sectors, AI and semiconductors hold the most promise. Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, key players in the semiconductor supply chain in these areas, are highly interdependent. Japan's strength in semiconductor materials and equipment can support the entire Asian semiconductor industry. And moreover, new industrial policy is were already being implemented before the Takashi administration, such as the TSMC's entry into Japan's Kumamoto regions, and the Japanese government's substantial investment in the new company Rapidus. This creates favorable conditions for recovery from decline and establish a foothold in cutting-edge semiconductors. For Japan, this sector is positioned as central to economic security and facilitates collaboration with like-minded Asian nations. So regarding high potential for expansion in Asia, in other strategic sectors, I would like to emphasize that one is the drug discovery and advanced medicine. And so disaster prevention, national resilience are also promising, I think. Conversely, but AI semiconductors also present challenge risks. For Japan and Asia to succeed in advanced semiconductors, massive investment and highly skilled talent are indispensable. Competition with China or the other big players in India were intensified. It is also undeniably the industry with the highest geopolitical risks in AI development. The US and China overwhelmingly lead Japan and the others. Both Japan and Asia are caught up in the accelerating wave of technological innovation and industrial revolution, where AI replaces software. Without domestic companies positioned at the forefront, achieving results may be limited to industries and companies that utilize AI. And so, regarding the innovation to realizations, I would like to emphasize the one big point. So, given economies scale and concentration of resources in the major countries, the challenge holds these regions. I think important point is rather than seeking export destination to replace the United States, it is actually crucial to recognize Asia's sufficiently large population and vast potential purchasing power, and to steer towards expanding domestic demand. Other Asian countries, most Asian countries besides China also remain overly exported oriented. Rather than seeking partner countries and regions depend on overseas market, I think a shift towards domestic as intra-regional demand. This intra-regional means that Japan and other Asian countries collaborations. Intra-regional demand is necessary, I think. And so after that, we could finally, we have to struggle with this difficult condition that the world, unfortunately, so that the rule-based international order may collapse, but we could survive. And so we middle collaboration could have the enough pathway to the prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Imamura-san. Now we turn to Dr. Sharma.
Thank you, Professor Anchordoguy. It's a very pertinent topic, and clearly we started innovation, and I want to point out that there are differences, different approaches in innovation, and also what we are focusing on it. Are we talking about innovation in research? Is it manufacturing? Is it processes that are beyond manufacturing? Is it governance? We're talking about a trade or supply chain related innovation. So it's a pretty broad basket of ideas that we are trying to tackle here. But I want to start with some of the terms that are used often recently to describe the way our sort of geopolitical, geoeconomic world looks like. And the terms that are thrown at us is, there are three. I would say one is deglobalization, the other is decoupling, and the third is de-risking. What we actually see in terms of the flow of trade, we realize that, well, it's hard to argue that there is deglobalization happening. This is a term that's been thrown around for last, I would say, a decade, 7, 8, 9 years. But when we look at the trade flows, it's actually increasing. Despite the tariffs that have come on last year, we've seen China, for instance, has crossed the trade surplus of 1 trillion record level, right? So what I would like to term it as, it's re-globalization. There are different ways of, there are newer approaches to globalization that we see unfolding right before our eyes. The second one, which was about decoupling, where the two major economic powers. They will create an alternate sort of economic system. There'll be a couple of those. They won't be talking to each other. That's the main thesis. But what we see actually, the dependence on, for instance, China for the manufactured goods, it has not come down. This does not mean that it will continue to be the case in the future. But at the moment, what I call again is recoupling. There are different partners that are coming together, and they are trying to sort of fill the void that was sort of left by the US exiting the multilateral sort of rules that they helped create. The third point, which is about de-risking, I certainly think it's a shorthand for China risk when we say de-risking. And what you actually notice is a lot of countries are realizing it's very, very difficult, but facing the choice, facing the dire consequences on relying on one particular supplier, now the countries are investing huge amount of money into this diversification. And there are two sectors in which this de-risking process seems to be progressing well. One is obviously the minerals, and the other is the pharmaceutical sector, API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient, where also China had 90% plus monopoly so a lot of new areas of collaboration is already happening. A lot of investment is going into this de-risking process, but we will be able to see the effect of it maybe 7-8 years from now, because building those supply chains anew, it would take a long time. Now, coming to Japan, where I am residing at the moment, I think a lot of negative news has flown when it comes to Japanese economy, and I would like to really counter that, that Japan is at the forefront of the technological innovation, and especially when it comes to the complex system. So if you look at the Harvard MIT-led ECI, which is Economic Complexity Index, you would find Japan has been there since 2002 as number one country when it comes to complexity in trade. So almost 23 years, we see Japan being the undisputed leader when it comes to the complex trading systems. Now, what it means is it talks about the sophistication of the manufacturing, a lot of processes, innovation, and the indispensable nature of Japan. You can't take Japan out of the global supply chain. Nothing is going to work. And that's what Japan's sort of role in the world, we probably can look from that perspective. Talking about probably small and middle power that we also hear a lot these days, especially with Prime Minister Carney referring to it. I would like to say that probably a better term would be the looking at the size of the economy, or maybe per capita income, right? We may call middle income countries, or because power is becoming increasingly, it's hard to argue that there are countries that hold power across the board, the way we traditionally looked at, right? There are not many countries that hold that kind of dominating power over other countries. So that's probably the starting point. And Imamura-san laid out the innovation-related strategy that Japanese government is trying to pursue, and a lot of those exciting areas. But also there are a lot of cases which we have seen evolve in last 6-7 years, where Japan is actually going on that frontier of technology, which doesn't get enough media attention. So hopefully we'll be able to cover that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we're going to turn to some discussion. I have some questions that I will ask all of the panelists, but some questions I might just ask, one main panelist who seems to be an expert in that area. But please do raise your hands if you want to add anything to that. My first question is a hard one, and it's to all of you. Given the recent global changes and the volatile, evolving new world order, how can Japan and other middle and smaller countries in the Indo-Pacific best approach the idea of collaborating across borders. I think it was Dr. Fuad who said, how do we do this? Also, are there some relatively easy, sort of low-hanging fruit industries that are much easier maybe for Indo-Pacific countries to start with and build up trust and the like that then could lead to more in-depth collaboration in other industries? So why don't we, anybody want to start? Okay, Dr. Fuad.
Sure, yeah. I think this is the key thing that, we're all struggling with. How do we really collaborate? And what is the easiest path or form of collaboration? I think I've been privileged to be part of a lot of ASEAN initiatives where I can share parts of Cambodia, Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, and Singapore, Malaysia, what we have been doing collectively. And that is to host conferences, entrepreneur dialogues, the ones that you mentioned in Korea and also in China. It is to learn from one another. Because when you put up entrepreneurs on stage and they're sharing their innovation, what happens is everyone in the panel, everyone in the audience learns. And they're like, there is that gap where perhaps we can collaborate. You build that relationship, you build that network, and it sparks some sort of discussion. And time again, I really have seen that these kind of small initiatives at first do end up growing into larger collaborations. One example is we've seen last year, because Malaysia is also part of the semiconductor industry, representing close to 13% of global supply. We saw that Japan has now invested in one of our states, building a manufacturing hub. And that is where we see such collaboration is so important, where we see strengths, we see knowledge, we see exchange in technology, in expertise. And that is really where we find that a lot of times it is about the different things that each country has to come together. So all in all, it is really about the ASEAN development. It's about the small things that we can do. It's about the conferences. It's about the networking opportunities. And I think that is the most low-hanging fruit that each and every one of the countries can begin with. And that is the gap that I see that should happen this year, even more so.
Great. Thank you very much. Imamura-san, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I think so. This was maybe the collapse of the rule-based international order. It also caused the challenge for not only Japan but also each Asian countries. But I think so. Why that the collapse has happened? I think one of the reasons is each country's employment issues. Regarding US, China's cheap imports defeats the US domestic manufacturing and cause that the free trade is not good for United States. This is the mutual recognition is not only the Republicans but also Democrats. So I think in that situations, I think so. One it is difficult to making the so-called long, so-called global value chain. I think it faces a big challenge. So now we're shifting from such a sort of two long global value chains to each country's mutual direct investments. So this is the case of Japan. Japan shifting from trade to the investments, especially for to the United States. Japan faces the trade war, long history of the trade war since starting from the 1970s. We experience and we recognize that respecting the target countries, the employment is very important. So we're shifting to the investment, and so we achieve so many the results that from that investment. Now, Japan is the top country of the U.S. The inward foreign direct investments, and so created so enormous 1 million employment in United States. That is the one example. So not only in the United States, but also in Asia, Japan could invest in Asia, but also Asian countries could invest in Japan. So mutual such as direct investments based on the priority or the advantage in each country's industries is the one of the idea. And so the pathway to our region's prosperities, I think.
Great. Thank you very much for talking about sort of interlocking investments. Dr. Sharma, did you want to add to that?
Yes, since you mentioned the low-hanging fruits, there are plenty of those that we have, especially among countries. So one thing I would say, which it holds really true for Japan, is there are countries which are like-minded, and they offer complementary sort of, they complement basically the strengths of Japan. An example would be ASEAN countries, some of the ASEAN countries, some of India would be another country wherein the young population could sort of help Japan, the labor shortage that exists in Japan. And but connecting that to innovation, I think the skilling part is what is really it's low cost, where you reskill the workforce, and there's not enough being done so far, but there is a lot of investment that's coming. A lot of countries are committing for re-skilling. And in ASEAN countries, in India, what I see, there is an increasing number of people who are learning Japanese, for instance, and that would be helpful in that. The other part of low-hanging fruit, I would say, even though there is a lot made out about the heavy investment you need in hyperscalers to build AI, like the frontier AI models, but a lot less emphasis is being given to the what is called small language models, or there are other beyond the language. There are AI sort of that inhibits a lot of those areas where the cost of building those systems is not that high because of leapfrogging. Now, the cost of access to, for instance, the latest NVIDIA chips, anybody can access. It's less than $1 an hour for the latest NVIDIA chip. So a lot of countries can actually partake into it, and they could be a division of labor. That's what we witnessed, I think, 3 days ago. There was an AI summit in New Delhi in which a lot of countries have participated. All the big companies have been there. And one of the outcome of that was the least we can do is to create some kind of rules for AI and set some kind of benchmark which would qualify for us to test if one particular AI is up to a level, because right now we don't have any benchmark around the world. So those sort of collaborative attempt to define these technological frontiers would be, I think, relatively low-hanging. But again, there has to be a will among the participating countries.
Great. Thank you so much for your insights. This one is about semiconductors, which Imamura-san had talked about. Prime Minister Takaichi just won a resounding mandate, and she has pointed out through this growth strategy 17 areas. And as Imamura-san said, AI and semiconductors are key. We've already had some attempts to make a more friendly and resilient semiconductor supply chain over the last 4 or 5 years, sort of more globally. But Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Malaysia, India, these countries are all players in this supply chain. And I think India would like to be a bigger player and will be. So how can relations between Indo-Pacific democracies in innovation related to semiconductors be strengthened in this region? So Imamura-san, I think I want to ask you first, since I think you've given some serious thought to semiconductors, since Japan is such a prominent player on chemicals, equipment, chips, could you think through what your thoughts are, how maybe Asia could strengthen this supply chain?
Yeah. So regarding the semiconductor supply chains, this is very, very long lines. And so the feature is that even China or even United States could not have those big major role. So Japan has some the materials, and also the Dutch, the Netherlands also has some sectors, and also India has also each respective ones. Yeah. So and also this is But so regarding AIs, I think the advantage in the United States and China is too big. So, but what we could do is embedding AI to each industries. This is a good opportunity for Japan, and also starting from such an idea to how embedding the AI to the existing businesses. Uh, Not only Japan, but also Asian countries have such opportunities. And so the collaboration with such as using the artificial AIs and so expanding to the semiconductors. This is one of the good idea, and still enormous market we have, I think.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Sharma?
Yeah, talking about semiconductor, I think, again, Japan is a very exciting place for that because there was a fab that was created by TSMC in Kumamoto, and that was supposed to be not the cutting edge. But what we have seen recently, there is a new fab that's under construction for last 4-5 months, and that is going to produce the most advanced 3 nanochip semiconductors. So clearly, there was a lot of unwillingness on the part of TSMC to part with that most advanced technology. But we see Japan with right mix of public policy, the government support, subsidies, everything. It's been able to attract almost cutting edge manufacturing. And so we see a cluster developing around semiconductor in Kyushu, for instance. There are many, many parts. Again, I think Imamura-san mentioned. So when you look at the entire supply chain, Japan is an extremely important component of that supply chain. You can't build advanced semiconductors without Japanese inputs. And that applies to all the advanced manufacturing, all the deep tech. That's where Japan comes in. Talking about India, I see in semiconductor space, when you look at the semiconductor design, different estimates say about roughly 40 to 50% of design of the advanced chips happen in one city in South India, in Bangalore. So that is there. And Indian government has already secured commitments from the private players, and also government is putting a lot of money. It's almost to the tune of $20 to $25 billion. There are 2 fabs that are already under that have reached pretty much the final stage. And these are legacy semiconductors, so they are not the cutting edge. But that's the Indian sort of approach. You may say it's the low-hanging fruit because the cost-wise, it's much easier to actually build. So there are 5 or 6 clusters that are built across India, and they are also similar. I think there are similar cluster you'll find in Malaysia, for instance. Dr. Fuad mentioned, like in Penang, there are 4,000 companies in that little tiny cluster. Almost all the big names in US, in China. So that becomes the collaborative space where companies from different sort of side of the political divide that we have, they come and they collaborate there. So Malaysia kind of gives a very different model of semiconductor innovation. And mostly it's about the testing and packaging right now. So there we actually see a lot of collaboration in different forms that's happening in Indo-Pacific.
Great. Dr. Fuad?
Yeah, I love how Dr. Sharma and Imamura-san shared that, because instead of seeing it as competition for the market, it is really more of collaboration where each and every one of the countries have their own skills and strengths. And it really is about finding that gel between what are the certain benefits, talent, capabilities, where we can really boost and expand into different markets and new markets. So I love how the conversation is around collaboration rather than competition, because it can actually be skewed towards competition if depending on the way that you look at it. Yeah.
Great. Okay. A couple of other questions. While we're focusing on collaboration among the sort of democratic countries in the Indo-Pacific, obviously China looms large. Several of you have already mentioned it. But how does this sort of China risk, and maybe there's some America risk too, I might add, as an American, how do these risks of behavior by the two big giants play into your motivations to collaborate at this, specific historic moment? It just seems like it's so important. This is to all of you about China risk. Sharma, Dr. Sharma?
Let me. It's a great framing of what's happening at the moment, and one recent example is of cross-country collaboration, where the two powers, so to say, they are kind of sidelined, and countries are looking for options. Is the India-European Union deal. And I think a lot was made out of the trade deal part of it, but it is all-encompassing, as the president of European Union, von der Leyen, termed it mother of all deal. And that's what it is. It's not a hyperbole. The reason is it is talking about technological sort of collaboration between the academic institutions, between the businesses and the government level. Dr. Fuad mentioned that triumvirate, and that's pretty much at the center of this deal, which recently, I think 2 days ago, President Macron of France, he was in Delhi, and he said in no uncertain terms that we are willing to part with our technology in the defense sector with India. We are willing to share it, and that is unprecedented. A lot of countries in Asia Pacific that are not Japan or China or Korea, they struggle with these basic technological to cross these thresholds. And we've seen with Chinese experience, no matter how much money you throw, for instance, building an jet engine, it is too sophisticated. Semiconductor is another example. So the collaboration that I see between European Union countries and India, that would be there's a complementarity to it. And that could become a sort of a format by which other countries can collaborate. This opens up market for Indian companies in Europe and vice versa. And which means a Japanese company can now go into India and get access to European technology, or if they want to collaborate with European companies. So a lot of that is the anticipated fruit of that deal that we are looking at.
Great. Well, it's nice that there are at least some positive things about the behavior of China and the US. Imamura-san or Dr. Fuad, would one of you like to, maybe Imamura-san first, comment a bit on the China risk and how that maybe plays into motivations today?
Yeah. I think that China's risk, yes, we are facing China's risk regarding so-called exactly rare earth or such a things. But so I think the core issue in China is insufficient consumptions, I think. So yeah, the advantage of manufacturing is that enormous, and so the struggle with the Chinese manufacturing in other markets is not smart. I think like EVs and solar power panels, such as so on. But China has potential into each household consumption or such things to rely on the investment to the oriented growth now facing difficulties. So shifting, we could not expect, but we would like to expect shifting from the investment to the consumption. China actually becomes a big market for all the Asian countries, and also all the Asian countries, especially India. We think as not only the industrial base, but also the consumption base or the domestic demand base. We understand that the surprisingly expansion of the India's middle income classes. Many Japanese the the retailers and so the retail banking institutions now focusing on India and open the branch and so expanding the operations. And also top is India, but also as Indonesia and the Philippines. That countries also have the enormous potentials. So based on the balance growth between the consumption and investment, we could find the pathway to the prosperity of new type of prosperity in Asians.
Well, thank you for pointing out that one of China's problems is a lack of consumption. But I will say that Japan had this problem too for a long time. And it does take time. It seems to me that the capitalist model that several of these catch-up nations in the catch-up stage have is to sort of suppress domestic consumption to encourage exports. And then you can't just switch off the light and say, consume, consume, consume. There's a lot of deep norms. So I'm seeing with China that I follow very closely now, a lot of things that I saw with Japan, a couple of decades ago. So Dr. Fuad, would you like to comment on the China risk issue?
Yeah, I think if we look at recent history, it's really about overdependence on a single country, right? China promotes its own digital infrastructure. It has its own AI governance needs, its cybersecurity frameworks. It's a country of its own, and it has its policies of its own. Similarly, like the United States, similarly like Europe. So overdependent on a single country, despite its capacity, despite its capability, is of course a risk. And that's where we come into this topic where diversity, strategic autonomy is so key, where we collaborate with one another and not rely entirely on one country to provide it all. So I think that's what I believe.
Right. Well, I think that's a very important point, and I think it goes with Imamura-san's point that actually the potential in Asia is huge. India, 1.4 billion people, and most of them are young. So, if you include Indonesia and many other countries with very young populations. So we maybe need to move away from this mindset of the US, China, the EU. Dr. Sharma, please add.
Yeah, I just want to follow up with Dr. Fuad's comment. And I've always been quite absorbed with what happens in ASEAN. And that's one of my research area as well. And one of the things that strikes me always is the balancing act that ASEAN countries have to do between the two powers, right? They are pretty adept at that. Do you see any change in that, especially considering the amount of disruption countries like Vietnam has to face because they were overly dependent, their economic model was overly dependent on US market access, and that kind of being in hobbling for a while. So is there a change in that balancing act that you see?
Yes, Dr. Sharma, I think we saw that last year, right? When there was the tariffs on this and the different tariffs for every single country. Although we are very much united, in the end, we did see that kind of split because it was every country for itself, depending on how we wanted to safeguard our country. So yes, despite having this unity, at certain risk, at certain stresses, it does cause ASEAN to sort of see, okay, what should we do for our country, for our people? So yeah, you brought that up very much. It's so important. But as much as we would like collaboration, there is that risk where if there are certain pressures, that's where that unity sort of becomes a little bit fragile.
Thank you.
Well, there are just so many questions we might have, but I want to turn to entrepreneurship now. Asia is widely considered to be a good ecosystem for entrepreneurs. And I wonder if those of you, well, Dr. Fuad, you are an entrepreneur, so I think I will turn to you first. But are there some gaps in government policies to support entrepreneurship and new startups? And how could these policies be improved?
I absolutely love the topic of entrepreneurship because it is definitely the core of innovation. And providing such opportunities for entrepreneurs really does allow us to experiment, especially in such a diverse culture, right? But unfortunately, I'm going to start with the bad news first. Unfortunately, if we look at the global investment in entrepreneurship, and let's look at Europe, for example, VCs invested close to 85.3 billion US dollars last year alone, right? 83 billion US dollars. Guess how much was in Southeast Asia specifically? Not even close to 10. It was only 5 billion US dollars. And that was across close to 500 startup companies. So the gap here is that there is minimal funding for Asian or ASEAN startups. And not only minimal, but every single startup gets a very, very small portion. So with that, the growth is, you can see very limited growth compared to European, American startups where you get a large sum. Now, I'm not saying that it's automatically successful, but the opportunity for you to scale, the opportunity for you to experiment when you have larger funding is much more massive. So the first part is really about the lack of funding and about the lack of opportunity for startups. The second is really the ecosystem. Malaysia has grown its ecosystem to support a lot of entrepreneurs. I think a lot of our ministries and government do cross-border kind of engagements. And that's something that myself, my colleagues, my entrepreneur friends, social entrepreneurs have seen, where MATRADE, our Ministry of Entrepreneurship, has sent us across to different countries across Asia Pacific to learn from other entrepreneurs, to be part of discussions. And that's where collaboration starts. But again, it goes back to, do we have the funds to scale? There previously were huge grants that were available. If I was to compare to Europe, nowhere near. I think Europe gives close to 2 million euros for grants. Ours is much, much smaller. I think it's just close to 100,000 euros if I was to compare. But then again, it really is about how can we really put in trust in our entrepreneurs? How can we really guide them? Some of the strategies in Malaysia and Asia specifically is that there has been a lot of money wasted when we invest in startups that, don't have the right guidance or capability or strategic mentorship. So how do we really groom this? But if we stop this completely, then the entrepreneurship ecosystem is not going to grow. So I think the key here is to really structure it so that there will be more entrepreneurs. As we can see some data, Gen Zs are becoming more intra or entrepreneurs. There is that need to become their own boss, and that is something we should leverage on. It is that need, that demand, that desire to fuel the younger generation's passion to become entrepreneurs. So gaps, opportunities, there's a lot to talk about there, but in the end, it really is about believing that the future is in entrepreneurship.
Great, thank you. Imamura-san or Dr. Sharma, you want to add something? Yes, please, Imamura-san.
Yeah, I would like to add a comment about the experience in Japan. I think that we should consider how to integrate the embedded ventures or new business or startups into each country's ecosystem of the businesses. Yeah, Japan admires the system of the so-called Silicon Valley. Or as the big expanding startup businesses, but Japan has traditional ones, and also the still that so-called Japanese big companies or Japanese the existing companies, the power is still big, and so all this making the entrance for the startup businesses, I think we could not expect the result. How to embed it, how to collaborate with the Japanese traditional business is the one of the pathway, I think. And also, so Japanese old companies now is not only old, they would like to change. So starting the so-called the corporate venture capitals and also starting the internal so the startup businesses. Yeah, there are many criticisms in such a system, but some of the trial it's making some fruit, I think. So I think the gradual but the respective ecosystem is very important. Yes.
Thank you so much. Dr. Sharma?
Yeah, just following up with Imamura-san's comment, I think Japan is changing in a way that I've not seen, being here for a really long time. One of my constant sort of attempt in the classroom used to be, asking students if they want to start up and running clinics with some of the colleagues about, providing funding and mentorship and all. And often I used to think the students tend to be overly risk averse. And so one of the interesting thing you find, which contrasts with other countries, is in case of Japan, you have enormous amount of funding available, but there are not enough startups that are going. There are incubators, there are accelerators in different parts of the country, especially Kyoto is really important when it comes to deep tech sort of startups. Kyoto University kind of, has this huge infrastructure they've created. In Tokyo, you have a similar thing. So when we talk about deep tech, yes, Japan is doing a lot. There are a lot of startups that are coming, but scaling is an issue. In case of Japan, you get easy funding, but Imamura-san rightly mentioned, in order to scale up, you have to actually collaborate with big corporations. It's the only way to bring it online on a large scale globally. And that's where a lot of Japanese companies, they kind of corner the market within the domestic. In Japan, they become big, but then it becomes hard for them to enter into other markets. And that's where I think the idea that bigger companies, because they also have their own investment funds now, venture funds. So there is a potential. But one of the exciting thing that's happening in Japan is there is enormous investment that's coming in the last 1 or 2 years in the hyperscalers. So these big data centers that are created in Japan, and the investment is coming from across the board. And a lot of these hyperscalers, they provide platform for a lot of local companies to come and use that platform. So there is opportunity, huge opportunity for Japanese companies. That apart, I also see there are these big traditional companies, the way they have also innovated beyond their core business. For instance, Toto is often talked about. Toto, the toilet maker, they have a very advanced materials division, which is a tiny division, but it brings in almost 40% of their profit. They provide sort of material for the semiconductor. Similarly, Ajinomoto is another example. I think they have this resin which helps in binding, packaging the semiconductor. So a lot of these traditional companies, they have these businesses. There's an attempt to bring in smaller companies and collaborate for basically increasing the use case of those businesses. And similarly, I would say in case of India, we have, it's a mixed bag. It suffers from similar issues. Funding is a big issue that Dr. Fuad mentioned. India also had that issue, but the government is trying to step in, and they have very ambitious plan for supporting startups. Almost about $8 to $9 billion have been in the current fiscal year has been apportioned for that investment. So, and 3 days ago, I was in China, the sort of in Shenzhen, which is supposed to be the Silicon Valley of Asia. And one of the things that I've had a lot of candid sort of discussion, and one thing that came out, there is this startup culture is kind of waning slowly because of the government's sort of control over where the funding should go. That has actually dimmed the innovation that you could see in the previous years. I could see in the incubators they were humming at a speed, but I could see a little bit of pessimism. And so we do see the innovation cycle in China kind of slowing down. And Japan seems to be in the right place. And the government is also coming out with very ambitious plan. So hopefully that would dovetail nicely.
Yes, Dr. Fuad.
I love how you brought that up. It's true. Very much that there is that passion, but at the same time, when there's lack of opportunity, lack of funding, that's where the passion dies down. But perhaps I can inspire or share a case study, an example of how we have grown. So a little bit about Plus Vibes. Yes, we are a mental health platform mobile app. And what we did was we went to Japan and we initially did a market study with Japanese mental health clinics saying, okay, can we help you digitalize your traditional solutions, which in most parts of the world is very much face-to-face. But in terms of access, digital provides you a wider access. The first thing we thought was that, there would be the traditional mindset where, no, we feel that, this is still a very much traditional solution. It needs to be face-to-face. But then we come across a few other mental health clinics, which are like, okay, let's collaborate. We're open to it. Let's try this out. And when we had this further discussion, a lot of it was about, yes, for us, our mindset is very much we're not so risk averse. We're very scared to take on certain risk and change from the traditional norm. But with collaboration, we do see this as an opportunity. So it's not so much that a country does not want to innovate, does not want to try on different strategies. It's more of building that trust in collaboration and seeing, do we have that understanding where we want to achieve the same goal? So I think for the audience here, it really is to try to not give up. If you're entrepreneurs, if you're thinking, does a country want to collaborate with me? I'm a very small company. I am not sure if my solution is too innovative enough and will they even understand? You have to try, because if you do not try, then you will never know if a company is actually looking for that solution or not.
Great. Well, thank you all for your comments about entrepreneurship. I want to go to some Q&A from the audience. And many people are asking if you could talk. And again, I want to say briefly, we don't have a lot of time, but if you could mention some successful recent initiatives on innovation, maybe even some in specific countries. One person asks about things in the Philippines. So let's know that we have some real successes and that we're building on that. So if you could just very briefly, those of you that know about some recent specific success stories, please let us know about them. Imamura-san, do you want to talk first?
Regarding Philippines? Yeah.
Do you have any specific success stories you want to talk about? Or it could be Dr. Sharma or Dr. Fuad speaking, anyone who has some specific examples of recent successful initiatives.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes. From our Maldives experience, we have the investment in Indonesia, and that's enormous population countries. We opened the so-called industrial park 30 years ago in the near Jakarta. Now the size of such industrial park become double or triple. And also the main issue was our agenda is to how to hire those the very laborers or the employment. So we our industrial park started so-called those education systems. Technology education systems also looks like Japanese kosen or the Japanese technology concentrated so the high middle schools. That schools provide those very skilled laborers, and also we could provide them the opportunity to the middle incomes. that expansion model is one of the ideas, and also all the many Asian countries, especially for the ASEAN, so Vietnam or Myanmar or such countries, have also the same issues. How to shifting from the low income to the middle income. They need the technologies. Also, they need the own the skills. Education is one of the important issues, and Japan or the other advanced countries, Asia could provide it.
Right. Right. Well, I think many of these, the entrepreneurship discussion too, talked about issues that kind of marriage maybe the advances of the richer Asian nations, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, with where the labor is, because but the other countries are suffering an aging society, whereas much of the rest of Asia has many young people. So anyone else want to add really briefly two specific success stories?
Yep, I'd love to share an example. Last year, I think Philippines this year is holding the chairmanship for ASEAN. But last year, when we had our exchange program, a lot of the entrepreneurship initiatives and programs that were hosted here in Malaysia were focused on, there was a strong emphasis on social stability and community benefit, which I do believe we have seen a lot of amazing innovations in Philippines, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, and Cambodia as well. I think the key here is really to tackle on that. With Philippines holding the chairmanship, it really is to bring in a lot of innovators to learn a lot about technological advancements, how we can collaborate across borders. So I think that really is it. In terms of entrepreneurship, it's about the community benefit and seeing how we can innovate and build this kind of stronger society together.
Great, thank you. Dr. Sharma?
Yeah, I mean, so I've got a sort of different idea that I want to bring to this debate. I think we've talked about a lot of technological startup entrepreneurship thing, but one of the development that we see is the excitement about opening of the Arctic route, which a lot of countries are interested, that would have economic consequences, quite positive. But what we are missing is the impact it will have on the rising sea level. That would affect disproportionately the lower income countries in Indo-Pacific. The estimates point to about 300 to 500 billion people in the next 15, 16 years that would be displaced by the rising sea level, depending on if you like it, if you like the findings of those research or not. And that means there would be a refugee crisis that we are looking into. And there's not enough done in terms of innovation, because the climate change has kind of gone to the background right now. And I think we need to really focus on that, because the biggest crisis that we'll face is not going to come inter-country, but it's going to be the climate change.
Right. Thank you so much for bringing that up. It seems like that is in a way a low-hanging fruit. I mean, a difficult, but very important, and at least to start on that, because time is passing quickly. I just have time, I think, for one more question. I'm so sorry, there's so many questions about specific countries. The Indo-Pacific is a big region. But one is in the era of economic fragmentation, is regional integration still realistic, or are we moving into technology blocks? So again, is this regional integration realistic, or are we moving toward technology blocks? A sort of probably a European one, an American one, a Chinese one. Any thoughts about that? Briefly, please. Dr. Sharma.
Yeah. I clearly see there's been a lot of discussion about sovereign internet, where each country would have its own sort of stack. But we find it's going to be increasingly hard to build that, despite the fragmentation. The countries do want to put in the local regulation of internet-based services. That's going to be probably not so good for the big companies, but the countries would try to sort of put those guardrails to align with their constitution or their rules and regulations. So that clearly is the case, but it's for the smaller countries, there are, again, low-hanging fruits. You can build up services which are what we call jugaad innovation. It's the frugal innovation and so a lot of countries can come together. There can be a lot of sharing of those platforms. For instance, India has this thing called digital stack, which has identification of the individuals, 1.4 billion people, the low-cost, almost free payment system, and also authentication of a lot of things. And that's almost zero cost. And India has been trying to approach other countries for that adoption. It's happening right now with some European Union countries. Singapore is a participant. There are Middle Eastern countries. So there is a potential, and it's open-ended, open source. So there is a lot of potential for countries that adopt that system to tinker with it, and ensuring that there is no security-related risk of adopting a system from other countries. So increasingly, I think we'll move into these open source protocols, which will definitely challenge the current sort of monetary order that we have, dollar-based, or so that is clearly seems to be the case. In ASEAN, there has been an attempt to create a digital sort of infrastructure as well. So a lot of those look like the low-hanging fruit, and they'll be easy to deploy. The cost is really low, relatively speaking.
Great, thank you. We have 1 minute left before I need to close this up. So if anyone has a final comment on that? No? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for your excellent questions. And unfortunately, we are running out of time. But we've learned a lot today. We've learned there is great potential for collaborating on innovation to strengthen the Indo-Pacific region. In fact, that collaboration accelerates innovation and it reduces vulnerability and builds resilience. We've learned that Japan is a major leader in innovation. Japan has deep R&D. Japan has many, many decades of experience of going from a catch-up country to an extremely advanced nation. And I would urge all the countries of the Indo-Pacific to learn from Japan. Certainly Korea, Taiwan, and China have done so. And its manufacturing is the world's best. We've learned that diversity of all these countries is a net major advantage, creating major opportunities. We've learned that young populations can be married with aging populations, countries that have more money. We've learned about strategic autonomy as a way to think about collaborating, but not getting taken in by the big powers. We've learned about entrepreneurship and issues such as employment problems, a declining population in some countries. So maybe entrepreneurs in parts of Asia need to marry with I don't mean literally marry, but get together with and collaborate with some of the VC capital in Japan, Korea, and Taiwan. We've also learned there are some key constraints on collaboration. There is a global fight for talent, and as Dr. Sharma has said, we need a globally accepted set of rules for collaboration. We've also learned that China risk is not going away. It's likely to be around, and that there is great uncertainty about what direction the US is going to turn to after Trump's term. So indeed, the evolving world order will continue to be filled with tension and instability for the foreseeable future. And this is, of course, what makes collaboration so valuable. And we've also learned about some low-hanging fruit and other important industries. Imamura-san pointed out that from Prime Minister Takaichi's point of view, AI and semiconductors are really the key thing. And I think AI is definitely on our mind. So unfortunately, we have not been able to address all of the countries you're interested in, all of the issues, and all of your questions. But I want you all to join me in thanking our three distinguished panelists for sharing their exceptional insights. If you're watching on the Nikkei channel or YouTube Live, please scroll down to find a link to our post-webinar satisfaction survey. We would greatly appreciate your input to help improve our series. And of course, we hope you join us for our March webinar. Finally, I would like to thank our partners, Nikkei and the government of Japan. Thank you very much and have a good day.